The battlefield was burning. Smoke rose into the black sky, heavy and choking. Flames licked broken walls, and the ground was covered with bodies and shattered steel. Everywhere there was noise, screams, distant gunfire, and the deep rumble of collapsing towers. Through the wreckage, a single figure stumbled forward. He was human, but barely standing. His leg was torn and bleeding, his armor cracked and useless. Each step was heavy, but he refused to fall. His name was Kale, a soldier from Earth, one of the last still alive on this cursed ground. The enemy had already declared victory. Their banners flew high. Their warriors searched the ruins for survivors. Most humans had been captured or killed, but Kale kept moving. He moved not for glory, but because surrender was impossible for him. From the shadows, a sound of movement came. He turned his head slowly, sweat dripping down his face. Out of the smoke stepped a tall woman in silver-black armor. Her eyes glowed faintly, not natural eyes, but engineered ones. She was no ordinary fighter. She was a blade master of the Dominion, the empire that had crushed 100 worlds before Earth. She saw his limp, his blood, his weakness. A cruel smile touched her lips. "Your war is over, human," she said coldly, her voice echoing like steel. She raised her blade, long and curved, shining under the firelight. Her steps were graceful, her confidence unshaken. Kale stood still, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. His eyes did not show fear, only calm. It made her pause for just a moment, but only a moment. She lunged, fast as lightning, and drove the blade toward his wounded leg. The strike should have ended him. The steel should have cut through flesh and bone with ease. But instead, there was a sound sharp and strange. The blade hit his skin, but instead of blood, there was a spark. The steel shattered into fragments, scattering like glass across the ground. The woman froze, her eyes wide. For the first time that night, fear touched her face. She pulled back the broken hilt in disbelief. "Ow!" she whispered, her voice no longer steady. Kale did not attack her. He did not raise his hand or strike. Instead, he lifted his head slowly, and on his face was a smile. Not cruel, not mocking, but calm, steady, and terrifying in its silence. The battlefield seemed to grow quieter around them. The fires still burned, the ruins still groaned, but her focus was locked only on him. Why was he smiling when steel had failed against him? Why was he smiling when he was wounded and alone? The woman stepped back, suddenly unsure. Her people had told her that humans were fragile, weak, and easily broken. But this man's flesh had turned her blade into dust, and he smiled as though he had expected it all along. Kale took a breath, steady and deep. His voice was low, but each word cut sharper than any blade. "You should not have tried steel," he said. "You should have run." The words chilled her. For the first time in her life, she felt the edge of doubt. This was not the weakness she had been promised. This was something else, something dangerous. Behind her, other Dominion soldiers were gathering. They had seen the spark, the breaking of steel. They whispered among themselves, their confidence cracking. Was this the weapon Earth had hidden? Was this the reason humans kept fighting even when they should have fallen? Kale did not move. He simply stood, blood on his leg, smoke around his shoulders. But the weight of his presence pressed against them. The broken sword at his feet was proof enough. This was no ordinary human. This was something else, something they were not ready to face. The woman's hand trembled on the hilt, her pride fighting against her fear. She wanted to attack again, to prove that humans were still weak. But her memory of his smile stopped her. That smile was not madness. It was survival. It was defiance. It was a warning. The battlefield held its breath. One wounded human against an army. Yet somehow, in that moment, he was the one who seemed untouchable. Steel had shattered, but his smile remained. And that smile promised one thing. The war was far from over. The woman's broken blade still trembled in her hand. Shards of steel lay scattered like fallen stars around her boots. Her breathing was sharp, her chest rising fast. This was not how battles with humans were supposed to go. She had trained her whole life, and no flesh had ever resisted her strike. Until now, Kale stood tall despite his wounded leg. Smoke wrapped around him like a cloak. The blood on his armor made him look like a dying man, but the calm in his eyes told a different story. His lips held that same quiet smile, a smile that made her feel smaller than she had ever felt. She had expected him to scream, to fall, to beg for mercy. Instead, he stood like a man who already knew the outcome. Her name was Saris, a blade master of the Dominion. She had been chosen since childhood, trained in perfect strikes, shaped into a living weapon. She had seen warriors twice her size fall at her feet. But now, her perfect strike had done nothing. The man before her had not even flinched. "You should run," Kale repeated, his voice steady. It was not a threat, it was not anger. It was a fact, spoken with the weight of truth. And that made it worse. Saris hated the way her hand trembled, hated that his smile was stronger than her blade. Behind her, Dominion soldiers whispered in low voices. They had seen the impossible, and fear spread like fire through dry grass. If one human could shatter steel with his skin, what else could humans do? The soldiers' confidence began to crack, and their eyes no longer held certainty. Sarah stepped back, her pride screaming against the urge to retreat. Her honor told her to strike again, but her instincts warned her that another strike might cost her more than steel. Kale tilted his head slightly, studying her, as if he was the one testing her courage. The silence between them stretched, heavy and unbearable. In Kale's mind, a memory stirred. A flash of a cold chamber, bright lights, and sharp voices. He remembered lying strapped to a table, his body screaming as machines burned and rebuilt him. The program had promised strength beyond limits, but it had not promised survival. Dozens had entered, only a few had walked out alive. He was one of them, changed forever. That was why he smiled. Pain was no stranger to him. Pain had been his companion since the day he was remade. Compared to what had been done to him in the labs of Earth, a blade to the leg was nothing. And Saris, standing frozen before him, was only another test. Kale did not speak again, but his silence was louder than any words. The Dominion soldiers shifted nervously, their weapons shaking in their hands. One of them muttered, "He is not human," but Kale heard it. His eyes turned cold and sharp, and the soldier fell silent. Saris clenched her jaw. She hated fear, hated the weakness it showed. She forced her legs to move, forced her voice to steady. "You bleed," she spat, pointing at his leg. "You are wounded, human. You cannot last." Kale looked down at his blood, then back at her, and the smile returned, calm and chilling. "Yes," he said softly, "I bleed." He took a slow step forward, dragging his injured leg, but his eyes never broke from hers. "And yet I stand." The words struck her harder than any blade. Saris felt something she had not felt since childhood, doubt. Why did he not collapse? Why did his eyes still burn with fire when his body was failing? She felt as if she was staring at something far larger than a man. The air grew heavy. The Dominion soldiers did not dare to move closer. The fires around them hissed and cracked, but all sounds seemed far away. The battlefield had shrunk down to only two figures, Saris and Kale. The hunter and the hunted, but no one knew anymore which was which. Kale's mind was sharp despite his wound. He knew their fear. He could feel it. Fear was a weapon sharper than steel. He let them taste it, let them wonder what he was. And in their silence, his smile grew stronger. Saris took another step back, her armor creaking. The Dominion did not retreat. It was forbidden, but her body betrayed her, moving without her command. Her heart pounded. Her hand gripped the broken hilt until her knuckles turned white. And still, she could not make herself strike again. The broken sword on the ground reflected the firelight. It looked small, useless, defeated, but Kale's smile looked endless, eternal. In that moment, Saris realized something dangerous. This man was not winning the fight with strength. He was winning it with will, and the Dominion feared will more than steel. Kale spoke again, his voice quiet but unshakable. "Tell your people," he said, "steel is nothing, but humans do not break." Saris froze, her breath caught in her chest, and for the first time in her life, she lowered her weapon and stepped back into the shadows. Her soldiers followed, their courage shattered. They had faced one wounded man and left the field without victory. And Kale stood alone in the smoke, bleeding but smiling. The smile of defiance. The Dominion camp was restless that night. Fires burned high, but no warmth touched the soldiers. Whispers carried through the tents like shadows that refused to die. They spoke of the human, the one who smiled when steel shattered. Some said he was a ghost, some said he was a weapon. None of them dared to call him just a man. Saris sat alone in her tent, her broken blade laid before her. She had not spoken since returning. Her pride was bleeding worse than any wound. Her hand still shook when she remembered the sound of steel breaking like glass. It echoed in her ears, mocking her. She had faced monsters, machines, and rebels, but never something like him. Outside, soldiers argued in low voices. "He bleeds like us," one muttered. "Then why did the blade break?" another hissed. Silence followed. No one had an answer. Fear does not need truth to grow, and tonight it grew stronger than their courage. Saris clenched her fist. She wanted to silence them, to shout that he was nothing but flesh. But the memory of his eyes, calm and unshaken, stopped her. What kind of man smiles while wounded? What kind of man stands alone against an army and makes them retreat? Her commander entered, tall and armored. His name was Varun, and he was not patient. "Speak," he demanded, his voice sharp. "What happened on that battlefield?" Saris lifted her head, shame fighting with fury. "My blade broke," she whispered. Varun's eyes narrowed. "Blades do not break on flesh." "I know," she replied bitterly, "but his flesh is not ordinary." The commander studied her, silent. He had fought many wars, seen many tricks, but the look in Saris's eyes was different. It was not the look of defeat, but of fear. And fear was dangerous. Fear could spread faster than fire. Varun turned to the soldiers outside. "Listen," he said, his voice rising. "He is not immortal. He bleeds. You all saw it." But even as he spoke, the doubt was clear in their faces. They remembered his smile. They remembered how one man had made them hesitate. Words could not erase what they had seen with their own eyes. That night, Saris could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in the smoke. Wounded, broken armor, yet untouchable. She told herself it was an illusion, but illusions did not shatter steel. Her pride wanted to kill him, but her heart whispered something far worse. What if killing him was impossible? Meanwhile, across the ruins, Kale sat alone among the dead. The firelight flickered against his face. His wound throbbed, but his mind was calm. He knew the Dominion was afraid now. Fear was his weapon, sharper than their blades. And he would let that fear grow. In the Dominion camp, the whispers turned into stories. One soldier swore he saw Kale's skin glow when the blade struck. Another claimed Kale did not breathe like normal men. The stories twisted and grew. By morning, half the camp believed he was not a soldier at all, but a creation of Earth's lost gods. Varun tried to crush the rumors, but he could not crush their eyes. Eyes that carried doubt. Eyes that no longer looked at humans as weak prey. Instead, they looked across the battlefield and wondered. If one human could smile in the face of death, what could the rest of them do? Saris sat before her broken blade, tracing the jagged edge. Her pride screamed to face him again, to prove she was not weak. But a whisper in her mind told her something she hated to admit. The human had not fought her with strength. He had defeated her with will. And if it could break steel, then perhaps nothing could stop him. Far away, Kale closed his eyes, his body heavy, but his spirit unshaken. The war was larger than him. He knew that. But tonight he had planted a seed of doubt in the heart of the Dominion. and seeds grow, especially when watered with fear. The night was silent, but Kale's mind was not. As he rested among the ruins, his body weak, his eyes closed, the memories returned. Memories he never invited, but ones that came whenever blood touched the air. Memories of the place where he was remade. He saw white walls, endless and cold. Lights so bright they burned his eyes. He saw the steel tables where men and women screamed until their voices broke. And he remembered the smell, metal, chemicals, and fear. Kale had been a soldier once, ordinary, human. He had a family, a life, dreams no different from others. But when the war came, Earth was desperate. The Dominion was too strong, their armies endless. So Earth turned to experiments. A program whispered in secret. A program that promised to build soldiers who could not break. Kale volunteered, not for glory, but for survival. For every battle lost, another city burned. For every day wasted, more children were taken. He stepped into the program because someone had to, because if not him, then another would suffer. He remembered the needles that pierced his veins, the machines that cut and burned, the liquid fire that filled his blood and made him scream until he wished for death. He remembered the doctors who watched, not with pity, but with cold eyes. Every scream was a number. Every broken bone was a note in their reports. One by one, the others died, some in the first hour, some after days. Kale survived, not because he was stronger, but because he refused to surrender. His body broke, healed, and broke again, until one day, it no longer broke at all, until steel could not cut, fire could not burn, and pain became an old friend. He saw his reflection once in the glass of the chamber. His eyes were different, colder, sharper. He smiled then, not because he was happy, but because he finally understood. They had taken everything from him, his family, his peace, his old life. But they had given him something in return. They had given him the one thing the Dominion could never understand, the will to endure. That smile never left him after that. On the battlefield, when blades struck, when bullets tore, when fire burned, the smile returned. It was not defiance alone, it was a reminder that no pain the enemy gave him could ever match what he had already survived. Kale opened his eyes, the memory fading. The night air was cold, the ruins quiet. He touched the wound on his leg, blood thick on his fingers. He thought of the woman Saris, her fear, her broken blade. She had looked at him as if he was not human. But he was human, painfully human. The difference was simple. He had learned to smile where others screamed. Across the battlefield, the Dominion camp stirred. Whispers of him spread, tales of unbroken flesh and a smile in the fire. But Kale did not care for their whispers. He knew what he was. He was not a ghost, not a god. He was a man forged in suffering. And men like him did not fall easily. He leaned back against the ruined wall. The stars above were dim, hidden by smoke. He remembered when he was a boy, staring at those same stars, dreaming of adventure. Now he stared at them as a soldier, dreaming only of survival. But somewhere deep inside, the boy was still there. The boy who wanted to see the stars without chains. The boy who had volunteered, hoping his pain would mean freedom for others. Kale closed his eyes again. The flashbacks came less often now, but when they came, they reminded him of truth. His strength was not in his body. It was in his will. His body could be cut, his blood spilled, but his will had been tested in fire, and fire had only hardened it. That was why he smiled. That was why steel shattered against him. Not because his flesh was unbreakable, but because his spirit was. And the Dominion had no weapon to kill the spirit of a human who refused to surrender. The night passed slowly. The ruins whispered with the wind. Kale did not sleep. He simply sat there, his wound bleeding, his body aching, his eyes on the shadows. And on his lips, the faint curve of a smile remained. A smile born not from strength, but from pain. A smile that promised the war was not yet done. The morning came with a sky heavy and gray. Smoke still rose from the ruins, carrying the smell of ash and blood. Kale pushed himself to his feet, his wounded leg trembling beneath him. The pain was sharp, but he did not curse it. Pain reminded him he was alive, and being alive meant the fight was not finished. From across the field, the Dominion soldiers stirred in their camp. Their eyes carried the weight of rumors. None of them forgot the man who smiled as steel broke. They watched the battlefield with caution now. Every shadow seemed dangerous. Every whisper of wind made them tighten their grips on their weapons. Kale saw them, their unease clear. He leaned against the ruins, his breath slow. He could not outnumber them. He could not outgun them. But fear was already inside their minds. And fear was a sharper blade than any sword. He let his limp show. He let his shoulders sag, as if the wound had drained him. From a distance, he looked weak, a prey waiting to be hunted. But behind his calm eyes, he was watching how they stared at him, watching how their hands trembled before they moved. The Dominion commander, Varun, stepped forward. His voice thundered across the ruins. "Human," he called, "you bleed, you are weak, your end is close." Kale tilted his head, his smile faint. "Then come," he answered simply. The single word cut sharper than any threat. Varun ordered his soldiers to advance. They hesitated, even with numbers on their side. They remembered what had happened to Saris. But fear of their commander pushed them on. They moved in lines, weapons raised, eyes fixed on the wounded man. Kale staggered back, dragging his leg. He wanted them to see his weakness. He wanted them to believe the trap was theirs. Each step was measured, each stumble carefully played. The Dominion closed in, but the closer they came, the faster their courage leaked away. When the first soldier charged, Kale did not raise his weapon. He only turned his body slightly. The strike missed, hitting stone, sparks flying. The soldier's breath came heavy, as if he had already fought a battle. Kale's calm eyes broke his spirit more than any strike could. Another came, swinging hard. The blade glanced against Kale's skin and cracked. Gasps echoed. The soldiers stepped back. Even when they attacked together, their weapons bent and broke. Steel failed, fire sputtered, and still he stood. Still he smiled. The trap was not in the ruins. The trap was in their minds. Kale's weakness was his lure. His smile was his blade. And fear did the killing for him. Varun's voice roared in anger. "Cowards, strike him down." But his soldiers were already falling apart. Some stumbled back. Some dropped their weapons. None wanted to be the next to test their blades against his flesh. Kale did not chase them. He stood among the ruins, blood on his armor, smoke behind his back. He let the silence grow. He let their fear spread. He knew they would carry this image back to their commanders. The image of a wounded man who would not fall. The image of a smile that survived steel. In the shadows of the camp, Saris watched. Her pride burned, but her fear was stronger. She remembered the sound of her own blade breaking, and she saw now what Kale was doing. He was not fighting for victory today. He was planting terror, planting it like a seed in the hearts of every Dominion soldier who dared to face him. Kale's leg gave a sharp throb, but he did not falter. He leaned heavier on the wall, hiding the worst of the pain. He whispered to himself a promise. Let them come. Let them fear. The storm has only begun. Above him, thunder rumbled across the gray sky. The air smelled of rain, heavy and wild. The Dominion had numbers, but their courage was breaking like glass. Kale stood alone, yet not defeated. For in their fear, he had already turned the tide. The storm was not in the clouds. It was in their hearts. And Kale was the lightning that had struck it. The rising storm had begun. The storm finally broke. Rain fell hard over the ruins, washing blood into dark rivers. Lightning split the sky, and in that light the Dominion came. Hundreds of soldiers, their armor black and glistening under the storm. Their war cries rose against the thunder, drowning fear with fury. Kale stood in the open, rain streaming down his face. His wound burned, his body ached, but his eyes were steady. He knew this moment was coming. The storm outside had awakened the storm within. The first line of soldiers charged, blades raised. They struck as one, their weapons flashing silver in the rain. But Kale did not step back. He raised his arm, and the blades met flesh that refused to break. Sparks burst, steel shattered, and screams filled the storm. One soldier fell back, clutching broken pieces of his weapon. Another stumbled in terror as his blade snapped like dry wood. The clash should have ended Kale. Instead, it ended them. More came, faster, desperate to prove themselves. Their blades cut air, their guns fired heat. But Kale moved through them like a shadow. Every strike they made only fed their fear. Every failure of their weapons carved deeper into their courage. A Dominion warrior leapt high, energy spear in hand. The weapon crackled with power as it drove down toward Kale's chest. The ground shook with impact, but when the light faded, Kale still stood. The spear had bent against his skin. The warrior fell back, eyes wide, his courage shattering with the weapon. Kale struck then, not with rage, but with precision. A fist to the chest, and the soldier flew into the mud. Another tried to flank him. Kale twisted, his elbow smashing into the soldier's jaw. Bones cracked under his touch. Each movement was simple, clean, efficient. He wasted no strength, but every strike carried the weight of survival. Rain mixed with blood, the battlefield a blur of silver and red. The Dominion shouted louder, trying to bury their fear. But every clash, every broken blade, reminded them they were not fighting flesh, they were fighting will, and what was not something they knew how to kill. Varun roared from the back, his command like thunder. Hold the line, break him, he bleeds like us. But the soldiers hesitated, their eyes drawn again and again to Kale's smile. It was still there, even in the storm, calm, steady, unbroken. That smile was killing them more than his strikes. Saris watched, her heart torn between pride and terror. She wanted to leap forward, to prove herself, but her memory of her shattered blade froze her legs. She had never feared anyone before, but now she feared what her people could not understand. Kale moved with the storm, each strike timed with thunder. When lightning flashed, his silhouette cut through soldiers like a blade. When thunder roared, another Dominion warrior fell. It was no longer a battle. It was a storm given flesh, and the Dominion was drowning in it. Varun pushed forward at last, his massive frame covered in heavy armor. His weapon was not steel, but a hammer forged with Dominion fire. It glowed red in the rain, steam rising from its head. He charged, each step shaking the ground. Kale turned, his eyes meeting Varun's through the storm. The hammer swung, fast and brutal. It struck the ruins, stone exploding into dust. Kale barely moved in time, the weapon passing inches from his chest. The ground trembled, soldiers stumbled. Varun roared again, swinging a second time. This was no ordinary strike. This was raw power meant to crush mountains. Kale caught the hammer with his hands. The weapon blazed, heat scorching his skin, but his grip did not break. Rain hissed against the red glow, steam rising in clouds. Varun's eyes widened behind his helm. No one had ever stopped his hammer. No one until now. Kale pushed forward, his muscles straining. The hammer cracked under his strength, the red glow dimming. With a final shove, it shattered, fragments falling into the mud. The soldiers gasped, their voices lost in the storm. Their greatest weapon had fallen apart in human hands. Varun staggered back, disbelief in his eyes. Kale stepped closer, limping but unyielding. His voice was low, carried only to the commander. Your weapons break, your courage breaks, but I do not. The storm raged above them. The Dominion's cries grew faint, and in the heart of the battlefield, Kale stood, bleeding, broken in body, but unbroken in will. His smile still there, steady as lightning. And in that smile, the Dominion saw the truth. This was not the end of man. This was the beginning of something they could not stop. The clash had not defeated him. It had awakened him. The storm slowly faded. The thunder grew quiet. The rain softened into mist. The battlefield was broken, littered with steel, bodies, and smoke. Dominion soldiers lay scattered, some dead, some crawling, some too afraid to rise again. And in the middle of it all, Cale stood, his leg bleeding, his armor shattered, his breath heavy, but his eyes still burned, and his smile was still there, steady as ever. Varun, the commander, knelt in the mud, his broken hammer beside him, his armor cracked. His voice trembled as he spoke. "What are you, human?" Cale looked down at him, his gaze calm. "I'm nothing more than what you made me believe I could never be," he said. "Unbroken." The word struck harder than any blade. The soldiers who remained froze. They saw not just a man, but something greater. Not a god, not a monster, but a human who refused to surrender. Saris stepped forward slowly, her weapon still broken in her hand. Her eyes searched his face, searching for weakness. But all she found was the smile, a smile that haunted her dreams. She raised her chin, though her voice trembled. "You should have fallen," she whispered. "You should not exist." Cale turned his eyes to her. For a moment, his smile softened, almost kind. "I exist because we do not break," he said. "Steel shatters, fire fades, but humans endure." Saris felt the weight of his words. She wanted to deny them, to call him a liar. But deep inside, she knew he was not lying. What she had seen could not be denied. The Dominion had conquered 100 worlds. But none had ever smiled at the edge of death. None had ever smiled while bleeding, except this man. The remaining soldiers looked to Varun, but their commander gave no orders. His eyes were filled with fear, his will broken. They looked at Saris, but she had no answers. And so their gazes turned back to Cale, the wounded man who stood taller than all of them. Cale raised his voice, not shouting, but speaking so all could hear. "Go back to your masters," he said. "Tell them what you saw. Tell them that humans do not fall, even when wounded, even when alone. Tell them that your blades break before we do." The soldiers hesitated. To retreat was shame, to flee was dishonor. But none stepped forward to challenge him. Not after the storm, not after the clash. Fear had already claimed them, and fear was a chain stronger than any order. One by one, they began to withdraw, slow at first, then faster, until only Saris and Varun remained. Saris lowered her head, her pride heavy. Varun turned without a word, limping back into the shadows. The battle was over, but the war was not. Cale leaned against the ruins, his strength nearly gone. The rain washed blood from his leg, the wound deep but survivable. He looked up at the sky, clouds parting to reveal faint stars. For the first time in years, he let himself feel the quiet. The stars looked distant, unreachable, but they reminded him of why he fought, not just to survive, but to make sure humanity would one day reach those stars again. Saris lingered, unable to walk away. She stared at him, her voice soft. "Why do you smile?" she asked. Cale met her gaze, his expression unchanged. "Because as long as I can smile, you can never win," he said. She felt her chest tighten. It was not arrogance, not madness. It was something far more dangerous. Hope. And she realized, then, that hope was stronger than any weapon her empire possessed. Cale turned from her, his back to the battlefield. His step slow, his limp heavy, but he did not look defeated. He looked eternal. Behind him, the whispers began again. Whispers that would travel across camps, across ships, across worlds. Whispers of the man who smiled when steel broke. Whispers of the human who stood unbroken. Saris clutched the broken hilt in her hand. For the first time in her life, she was afraid to return home. Not because of punishment, but because of the truth. If even one human could endure like this, what happened if all of them did? Cale disappeared into the ruins, swallowed by smoke and shadow. His smile unseen now, but still felt. A mark left on every soldier who had faced him. A mark that would never fade. The battle was done. But in truth, something greater had begun. The Dominion thought they were fighting a war of weapons. But Cale had revealed the truth. This was a war of will. And in that war, Humans would never break.